It is 6 o'clock. I am calling this meeting of the Town of Luneburg Heritage Advisory Committee to order. Before we begin, may I acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And also, I would like to take this time to acknowledge, since we last met, of the passing of AJC member David John Lobb. He contributed a lot to this committee during his years here, and on behalf of the Heritage Advisory Committee, I wish to express our sympathies to his family. Moving into the business, the first order is the agenda and the motion to approve. May I have a motion to that effect? Moved by Councillor Bertels, seconded by Natalie Irving. Thank you. All those in favor? Contrary minded? The motion is carried. The next motion is to approve the agenda of the minutes of the meeting of April 19th. May I have a motion for that? Moved by Oliver, second by Councillor Bertels. Thank you. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion is carried. No business arising from the minutes or unfinished business, which moves us to section 6, new business, which is the application for the demolition of 102 Pelham Street and the expansion of 94 Pelham Street through the Luneburg Arms Hotel, at which time I'll pass this over to our Heritage Manager, Arthur, to give us a brief overview on that.
Thank you, Chair. The owners of Luneburg Arms Hotel, located at 94 Pelham Street, has made an application to demolish 102 Pelham Street and consolidate the lands with 94 Pelham Street to enable an expansion to the hotel. This report will address the demolition of 102 Pelham Street. One of the criteria for demolitions speaks about council's review of the proposal, if any, for a replacement. So this report also touches on the redevelopment of the Luneburg Arms Hotel. Both properties, 94 Pelham Street and 102 Pelham Street, are in the Old Town Heritage Conservation District. The properties are not registered heritage properties. However, they are located in the UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Old Town National Historic District, as well as the Heritage Conservation District. As such, they are regulated pursuant to the Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw. 102 Pelham Street, according to the inventory of historic buildings, is a long barn-like structure with a depth of 60 feet, originated on the site and thought to have been built by Joshua Hurdle, a cooper, who purchased the property in 1872. By 1906, the barn was reduced in depth, and it is unknown whether the present building remains as part of the original barn structure or is an entirely new structure. The building is considered a pre-1940s main building as identified on map 2, and as such, any demolition request requires a public hearing and council's approval. Policy 4.8 of the Heritage Conservation Plan is reviewed in attachment A in the report. As with 102 Pelham Street, 94 Pelham Street, the actual hotel itself, is also located in the Heritage Conservation District and regulated pursuant to the Heritage Conservation District Plan and Bylaw. The expansion design is reviewed in attachment D. The municipality may grant the application either with or without conditions, or may refuse it. One of the first steps is to obtain the advice of the Heritage Advisory Committee, as well as the Luneburg Heritage Society, pursuant to 4.8.1.5 of the Heritage Conservation District Plan. A letter from the Luneburg Heritage Society is attached in attachment G. The town also received a written submission from Irma DeSales, architect, and Stephen Richards, attached in attachment H. The refusal of the demolition request would effectively end their application, and the review of the proposed design of the addition of the hotel will not be necessary. Such a refusal is appealable to the Public Utilities and Review Board, and reasons for council's refusal would have to be given. If council wishes to entertain the approval of the application for demolition, they may review such approval in light of the design of the replacement building, the addition to the hotel. Council may grant the demolition request with or without conditions, as well as conditions associated with the replacement building, such as, but not limited to, a timeline for its construction. These conditions are reviewed in attachment A pursuant to policy 4.8.2 of the Heritage Conservation District Plan. Such approval is also appealable to the Public Utilities and Review Board. So I'd just like to go through the design of their proposed replacement building. And if I could ask Heather to bring up the PowerPoint presentation. On the bottom of the screen is an outline of the site plan of the proposed expansion to the Luneburg Arms Hotel. It's basically a 25-foot wide addition on the eastern side of the hotel, going back the full length of the existing building. Next slide, please. Now, the next few slides just outline their concept for 14 additional hotel suites. So on the first floor, they're planning to have 4 additional hotel suites. Next slide, if you may. On the second floor, another 4 hotel room suites. On the third floor, there's 3 proposed new hotel suites. And on the 4th floor, also 3 additional hotel suites to make up a total of 14 new hotel suites. Next slide, please. Now this slide includes elevation drawings. On the bottom left is the proposed addition on the left-hand side of the Luneburg Arms as one looks at the building from Pelham Street, looking south towards the harbor. The top left is the rear of the building that looks over the harbor. And the pictures elevations on the right-hand side are just the side elevations of the proposed building. Next slide, please. Now this slide shows the bulkness and the heightness of the building. It is quite high and it does tower over 106 Pelham Street by a full story for sure, a little bit slightly over a full story. Next slide, please. And we'll just go through a series of renderings, but in this rendering, again, this is from Pelham Street looking south, the front of the building. And these are just additional elevation drawings as well, showing the buildings. This is quite similar to the previous slide showing the height of the addition over the neighboring property. And this elevation just is added to really showcase that the existing hotel is like a non-conforming pursuant to its height. We have a provision in the new land use bylaw that provided you don't further encroach or further increase the height, you're allowed to match the height of the existing structure. So this drawing is to show that the height of the proposed addition is 44.6 feet compared to the neighboring property at 106 Pelham Street, which is 30.5 feet. So it is substantially higher than the abutting property. Next elevation. This just shows the Luneburg Arms from the harbor, showing the proposed addition of the fourth dormer on the right-hand side, as Heather is pointing out in the slide. Next slide, please. This is just from Irma's presentation of what the building's form would look like along Pelham Street. Again, a very similar view along Pelham Street. And we can skip this slide and the next slide, Heather, if you may. And the next slide, that's not relevant for tonight's consideration. So there is a proposed motion in your package this evening. And the motion is similar, that the HAC recommends the council approve first reading and pass a public and proceed to a public hearing in order to consider, and if deemed advisable, approve the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition or removal of the structure located at 102 Pelham Street, subject to the following condition: that the certificate of appropriateness for the demolition or removal of the structure located at 102 Pelham Street be conditional upon the owners obtaining a building permit for the addition to 94 Pelham Street in conformity with the application of plans and elevations which are attached in attachment F in the report as submitted and attached within 4 years of the date of the issuance of the certificate of appropriateness for demolition or removal, so that we actually have a time frame for them to undertake that proposal. Otherwise, the certificate for demolition or removal will not carry on beyond that date. So that is my report for the committee to consider and make a recommendation to council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur. At this time, are there any questions from the committee for Arthur from that report? Hearing none, I will pass this matter over to the committee and ask what where you stand with it. Oliver.
I think I should begin by saying that it's been drawn to my attention since Wednesday evening that one of the members of the Planning Advisory Committee has close family links to the applicants or their business at the inn. And in the light of that, I think I should declare my own links to the hotel industry, in case anybody afterwards says I hadn't. I had the good fortune to inherit a substantial stock holding in the International Hotel Group, and I've benefited considerably from that. They are the sort of heirs of the company that bought my grandfather's business in the 1920s. I also have two nephews, my brother's two sons, who own and run one of the largest rivals of Booking.com and Expedia, a substantial international business. So I have quite a lot of link to the hotel industry. And I could also say that if I didn't live in Luneburg and was visiting, I think I would choose to stay at least one of the centrally located hotels. Back in pre-COVID days, when it was possible to go and stay in European cities, as my wife and I often have, we've always chosen to stay in a good centrally located place and walk around. So I am full of understanding of the attraction of this particular hotel. And I am very sympathetic to the fact that Luneburg, while we need to have all kinds of economic activity that is not dependent upon visitors, we also need to be attractive to visitors. So I see where the applicants are coming from. I suppose I should also say that as one who was an economics major at university, I have my doubts as to how economically feasible it is to recoup the capital cost of the considerable things they're proposing on the over the relatively short season, but that's their problem and not ours. Now, when this first came to our notice early in the fall, I must admit I felt a considerable degree of sympathy with the proposal, perhaps in part for the reasons of my personal background that I've outlined. And in many ways, it's a proposal which seems to make good sense. Although I've long had some unease about how dominant within the total view of the town from the side of the harbour that I live on, or from the waterfront indeed, I do recognise that when this was built about 20 years ago, a genuine attempt was being made to have a building which in its design features would fairly much fit Luneburg. And of course, it did incorporate what had been Rissa's Restaurant, subsequently the Dolphin Tavern, into the building. I would also say that obviously in designing this potential further extension, they've made a good attempt to continue to have it fit, although inevitably it will be even more dominant within the total view of the town from either across the harbour or from the waterfront on the town side of the harbour. And I respect all that Arthur has done, has written about the detailed ways in which they appear to have tried to meet the requirements of our existing heritage bylaw, and the ways in which, while it is a very dominant building, the design features try to fit in well. So I started out fairly sympathetic, but I have to say the longer that has elapsed, and maybe it was their bad luck that it's about 2 months since we first saw these designs before we've had a chance to meet and talk about them, I've become increasingly less sympathetic. I think there are 2 reasons behind this. The first, which is along the lines that I spoke to on Wednesday night, is the fact that although the building that they would like to demolish is not, by the overall standards of this town, a particularly notable building, as it happens, it received most of its present form when the family of my wife's oldest friend, they've been in school from grade 2 together, used to live there, the Levy family, and one of the bits in our agenda shows Diane Johnson as owner of that property at one time. So despite all of that, and it being kind of a bit of our own family connection, and it's not a very notable building, but there's a real concern, and it's obvious that I'm not the only person who feels this, about, I suppose it's the thin end of the wedge argument, about saying, let's say goodbye to older buildings, even if they're not of very great note, in order to allow the expansion of newer buildings. So I've developed an increasing sense of unease, not so much about the specific proposal, but about what approving this proposal would mean in relation to the possibility of other similar proposals that might come to us down the line in other parts of Old Town. But I have another, which is much bigger and specific concern about the design proposal. And that is, I think, very obvious as one sees not so much the elevations themselves, which don't kind of leap out off the page so strongly, as what Arthur refers to as the renderings. it's fine, or at least it just has to be fine because it's there, that, oh yes, thank you for that. You won't hear me so well, but you know, that end is obviously big and close up against Pelham Street. But then that's the way that building always was. I mean, they incorporated when they built this hotel, they incorporated what was there, and we can't possibly complain, and that's the fact of life. But I'm not at all convinced that it's going to be good and helpful to the total streetscape, and hence to the entire feel of Old Town, to have quite such a bulky extension at the other end. There's two things that I think are wrong with it. The one is the fact that it does come.
Oliver, if I could
Oh,
just
sorry.
mention, there's just a request from those
Yeah,
watching
sorry.
online to speak into the microphone.
Yeah, sorry, it's difficult to speak into the mic and to look at the board, but there's two things that I think are wrong with it. The first is the fact that it is completely right up against Pelham Street. I think I'd have much less unease about it if the towards Pelham Street facade were set back some number of feet. I wouldn't wish to specify exactly how many, but I think that the whole thing would seem less oppressive if there was more of a setback. And it's worth remembering, although the elevation doesn't display this, but a number of the renderings do, that the section of the building between the bulky bit next to the Royal Bank and the proposal, that section is set back considerably, and that very much helps the feel of the whole thing from Pelham Street. The other thing about it is the fact that Pelham Street is not level. It slopes down as the elevation shows. And with the result of that is that while you've got the same roof line, you've actually got a substantially higher, it's substantially higher above the street level. You've effectively got almost an extra story. And I just think that the effect of that is going to be very difficult. It will tower completely over the neighboring property. And I just think that the whole thing is just not going to be right. I say, as I said at the beginning, I've got much sympathy with the desire of the owners of the Luneburg Arms Inn to expand. I have much sympathy to the whole concept of having good hotel accommodation in the center of the town. But I don't think this proposal is the right one. I'm not sure that there is a right one, but there may be, but I certainly don't think either because of the bulk of what's proposed or the cost in terms of the town as it is of the demolition of the existing building, that this is the right way to go. And I respect what Arthur says about the fact that we need to sort of first of all think about the request for demolition, and if we don't agree that, then of course we go no further. I think the difficulty with that line of argument is that actually the two things really do go together. That if we felt that it was absolutely right, the proposal for an extension of the existing building, then we might feel that we would accept the cost of having the existing small building disappear. But I certainly don't think that this proposal is enough right to justify supporting that.
Thank you, Oliver, for those points. Is there anyone else on the committee who wishes to speak at this time? Yes, Councillor Burgos.
Thank you. I just thank you, Mr. Osmond, for your comments there. I guess I'm on the opposite end. I know that there's people for it and against it. I look at it as he must be realizing that we need extra rooms in town, that we obviously are bringing more tourists to town. That's also going to bring more economy into the town. So I'm for this.
Thank you, Councillor Bertels. Anyone else? Yes, Natalie.
Thank you, Chair. I guess echoing the letter that I wrote on behalf of the Luneburg Heritage Society. I am opposed to this development. As Oliver so eloquently stated, there are concerns about the bulk. I do have concerns about the bulk of and the massing of the building, and as the applicants noted in the PAC meeting the other evening, this is part and parcel with the other structure at the corner of Duke and Pelham, and combined, I believe there's a significant amount of massing added to that block. Before writing this letter, I did reach out to our membership of the Luneburg Heritage Society to get some direction as to feelings. There was some ambivalence. There was no outward support, and most of the feedback that I did receive was opposed. So I did feel that it was my duty to carry on the feelings of our membership, those that I did hear from. And although 102 Pelham is not a designated heritage building, it does contribute to the story of Luneburg. And we have a number of significant buildings in town that, although they are not registered heritage sites, I wouldn't want to see the same outcome or consideration for them. So I guess that's kind of what I wanted to say. And even I live on Pelham Street. I walk along that stretch quite frequently, and even the stretch, I'm looking at my picture between the door to the spa and the main entrance, and even though that is about 1 story, or maybe 10 feet, even that section is quite blocked. Mass, the feeling of the mass is there as a pedestrian. So I guess that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Irving. Anything else from the committee?
I'd like to recommend the motion right now.
Okay. So we have a recommendation on the table for the motion as it stands, which, Heather, would you be able to bring that up for a moment, please? Okay, so the recommended motion. Okay, thank you. So the recommended motion is that the HAC recommends that council approve first reading and proceed to a public hearing in order to consider, and if deemed advisable, approve the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition or removal of the structure located at 102 Pelham Street, subject to the following condition: that the certificate of appropriateness for the demolition or removal of the structure located at 102 Pelham Street be conditional upon the owners obtaining a building permit for the addition to 94 Pelham Street in conformity with the applications and plans or elevations in attachment F, as submitted and attached within 4 years of the date of the issuance of the certificate of appropriateness for the demolition or removal. Is that clear to all committee members? So that has been moved. May we have a seconder for that? Finding no one to second, that motion will stand as defeated. May we have a motion brought forward to another effect? Mayor Isser.
I can't move a motion, but just Arthur, wouldn't that constitute a negative recommendation and be forwarded to council as such?
Through the chair, it could be just a negative wording that, you know, that the HAC does not recommend the council approve first reading and proceed, you know. Just the refusal of instead of the approval of.
Okay, so this will stand as the motion being defeated then, not finding a seconder. Is that correct?
That's my understanding is.
Okay. That being the case, then the motion has been defeated. So this will come forward to council. However, as it stands, this recommendation will come to council as a defeated motion. So that takes care of that, which then just. And was that both, Arthur? That included the expansion of 94 Pelham as well, did it not? Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I didn't get over. So that concluding our business here, the next meeting date, but we have nothing at the moment, that will be called when the time comes in an appropriate time. So with no further business, I call the meeting adjourned.